In this lecture, we are going to define onClick listener for our bottom navigation view items. In fact, we are going to define a functionality for each of the items in our bottom navigation view. I want to add a text view to the center of my layout and write a code for the onClick event of the items in my bottom navigation so that when I click an item on the bottom navigation view, the text of that item is displayed in the text view. Let me explain this in action as we proceed. First, I define a text view, and I set its height and width to wrap content. I also give it an ID. For example, I type @ID / text_ID. After ID, I add a text attribute, and for its value, I use the title of my first bottom navigation item, which is recents. So I type @string / recents. After text, I type Android:\layout_center horizontal, and I set its value to true. You see that my text view is horizontally aligned at the center of my layout. Also Android:\layout_center vertical, and I set its value to true. This way, my text view will be aligned also vertically at the center of the layout. Now I define its text size using the attribute Android:\textsize, and I set its value to 40sp. Also, I define text style, and I set its value to bold. So, we defined a text view at the center of our layout, which will display the text of the item selected in our bottom navigation view. I close the activity main layout, and I open the main activity class. Inside main activity, I define an object from the bottom navigation view class. I name it bottom navigation view. I also create an object from the text view class. I name it txt. Next, inside the onCreate method, I get the reference for my bottom navigation view object. I type bottom navigation view equals, I cast the right side to bottom navigation view, find view by ID, r.id dot bottom navigation _ID. Also, I type txt equals, I use casting for text view, then I type find view by ID, r.id dot text_ID. So far, we created an object from the bottom navigation view class and another object from the text view class. Also, in the onCreate method, we connected these objects to their corresponding views. Before adding an onClick listener to the bottom navigation view, we'll need to implement onNavigation item selected listener for main activity. So, in the definition of this class, I add implements bottom navigation view dot onNavigation item selected listener. You see that Android Studio is showing an error message for the definition of our class. I hit Alt and Return and select Implement Methods. This window shows that the onNavigationItemSelected method has to be implemented inside our class. I click OK and the method is automatically added to our class. You see that the error message is now gone. Once I have initialized my objects inside the onCreate method, I type bottom navigation view dot set onNavigationItemSelectedListener. Inside the parentheses, I type this, meaning that inside the main activity class, I have the method onNavigationItemSelected. Each time we click one of the items in our bottom navigation, the code inside the onNavigationItemSelected method is executed. In the beginning of onNavigationItemSelected, I define an integer. I name it ID and set it equal to item.getItemID, which means get the ID of the item that the user has selected and assign it to ID. Now I can use conditional statements very easily to write specific code for each of the items on my bottom navigation. I use a switch code statement and I pass it the ID variable. The first case is for r.id.recents_id, which means if the user has selected the recents item, then perform these actions: return true. I can also use the break statement. The next case, r.id.favorites_id. If the user has selected the favorites item, then return true. And the next case, r.id.nearby_id. If the user has selected the nearby item, then return true. So I defined a switch statement using the ID variable, and for each of the items on my bottom navigation, I defined a case statement. Now I'm going to enter my specific code for each of the cases. Each time an item is selected on the bottom navigation, I want the title of that item to be displayed in the text view. So I type txt.setText. This sets the text for my text view. Inside the parentheses, I specify the text to be displayed. getResources.getText r.string.recents. If the user selected the recents item, then display the title of this item in the text view. Likewise, for the next case, I type txt.setText. In the parentheses, I type getResources.getText. getText r.string.favorites. And for the third case, I type txt.setText in the parentheses getResources.getText r.string.nearby. So we specified a code for each of our items. Now let's take a look at our project on the emulator. Once the app is successfully running on the emulator, you see that by default our recents item is selected and the text for recents is displayed in our text view. Now I select the second item, favorites. You see that the text for our text view changes to favorites. And that's because when I select this item, the onNavigation item selected method is invoked, and following that, my second case for favorites_id becomes true, and therefore the text view text is set accordingly. Similarly, when I select nearby, the third item in my bottom navigation, the text for my text view changes to nearby. This way we created an action for each of our bottom navigation items. You can enter your arbitrary code inside the onNavigation item selected method for any of these items. And that's it for how to create onClick listeners for bottom navigation items. In the next lecture, we will generate a signed APK for our bottom navigation project.